I may be muting every once in a while because I've got a bit of a cough.
Oh no!
Oh.
Sorry, I was contagious there for a couple weeks.
Yeah, you gave it to me over the internet.
Sorry about that.
Right,
You
guys,
got a virus.
Yeah.
Everybody in the chat room. We'll be starting in a minute or two. We are live.
Shoot.
Oh, you okay?
Jeez. Hi, Cody.
It's 8:28. All right, we got about a minute.
Challenges.
Chris, you have any questions before we start?
Nope, I think I'm good.
I'll turn you up just a little bit better. I'd rather you be too loud than too soft. Hey, mini chat room. Does Chris sound okay? Chris, say something.
I'm saying something right now.
Does he sound okay? Chat room? Come on. Somebody answer me.
Are they late?
Is the chat room alive?
They're alive.
They're all talking to each other.
There we go. Got a sounds good
All right,
from Bounce
sounds
Bounce.
good. All right, there you go.
All right.
All right, I'm going to start this up. Chad, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Jesse, you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Chat room, anybody you want to you have a question for Chris? Rock Chalk, give us a call. 808 got swag 808-468-7924. We're gonna start the show. Let me push play on this thing.
You know, the community effort.
What was that?
That was play.
That was what?
You hit play, not record.
I didn't hit anything. Everybody
Okay.
good? All right, you ready?
Good.
Okay, we are recording. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
You wanna know how to find it. Seek it out when they hide it. You know it's in the bag when it's an easy grab. Come on, take a chance now. So go, geocache. And if you need help, we're right there in a flash. If you got a question, just call in and ask. Uncover the stash. On the Geocaching Podcast. The Geocaching Podcast.
Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday. It is 8:30, which means that it is once again time for the Geocaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burks. We have Shorty Nits manning the phones. And please welcome my co-host to my virtual left, Taz 427.
Howdy, y'all. It's time for some more evolution.
That's right, Chad. Tonight's episode is 551, recorded live on February 20th, 2019. And is the evolution of geocaching part 2 with the one and only Rock Chalk. The phone lines are open, so give us a call, 808-468-7924. That is 808-GOT-SWAG. But before we do, let's welcome Chris to the show. Chris, Rock Chalk, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
And if anybody doesn't recognize that voice, I'm sure you must. If you listen to the Geocaching HQ podcast, he is the host of the Geocaching HQ podcast, a voice that is unmistakable. A good voice for radio, sir.
I don't know if unmistakable is a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm going to take it as a good thing.
No, take it as a compliment. You have a good voice.
Thank you.
Before we get the show started, Chad, we got 11 years to go through tonight. We got to get through it all. So I'm going to burn through our necessary stuff we have to get through. Obviously, we're going to Patreon, guys. Costs a lot of money to make the show work. We'd really appreciate your support. If you'd like to follow us on Patreon, tiers starting as low as $3, please go to patreon.com/the Geocaching Podcast, Patreon/the Geocaching Podcast.
All right, tonight's show is brought to you by Cachly. Cachly is an advanced geocaching app for iOS. It features powerful online and offline features, including filtered searches, offline maps, offline saving of caches. Cachly has hundreds of advanced features that will make your geocaching experience just that much better. Get more information at cachly.com. That's CACHLY.com.
Tonight, we're also sponsored by Logwork. Logwork are the creators of the fantastic logbook, made with genuine write-in-the-rain paper. The logbook's designed for the micro-containers of the present and future, geared towards the hider who'd rather go caching than do cache maintenance. Find them at logwork.com, LOGWERK.com.
It's also brought to you by FTF Geocacher Magazine. FTF Geocacher is the magazine for geocachers written by geocachers with 6 issues a year. FTF offers practical advice, hints and tips, cacher bios and milestones, geocaching events, trail tales, and all things geo-related. Find them at ftfgeocacher.com. That's FTFGeocacher.com.
Nice, Jay. Didn't mess it up at all. Well done, sir. As always, you can find the links to all our sponsors in our show notes, which is linked on our website. Jesse, is that you making all that noise?
Probably.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Sorry. I'm actually replying to a listener who emailed me a question, so sorry about that.
All right. Guys, last week we went through with Brian Roth. Got a ton of great feedback from that. We appreciate that. We're going to get more great feedback tonight because we've got Chris Ronan on the show, another lackey at Groundspeak. Chris, if I'm remembering correctly, you are the community relations, correct? Is that your title?
Yeah, I think that's my current title. Something about community relations, but I'm on the community volunteer support team at HQ, and so besides working with community volunteers such as the reviewers and forum moderators and translators, everyone on our team also has, I guess, kind of a side job, and mine is PR and media relations type stuff. So if somebody from what I would call the Muggle media writes in and asks a question about geocaching, I'm kind of the first line of defense on those questions. So yeah, it's kind of a wide-ranging job that I have, but it's all related to geocaching, which is obviously a lot of fun.
Sure, absolutely, I bet. Yeah. All right. So last week we got through 2007 is where we left up. So we're starting with 2008, and I'm assuming Chad, you started in when? 2000.
I started in 2010.
Okay, so we'll get to that tonight.
Not yet.
Jesse started in 2011, correct, Jess?
Correct.
And Chris, you started in 2011, correct?
2011, that's right.
All right, so we're still with. I'm the only one starting in 2008 here. I started. Here we go, guys. 2008. Boom. On GC, it was a quiet year for Groundspeak. The International Space Station geocache was hidden in 2008. Everybody remember when that happened?
Oh yeah. So
you remember you weren't even with geocaching then.
Oh well, I remember talking about it with online hockey guy who tried to get credit for it. He's got a picture of himself with a picture of it in front of the actual container that was on the space station. So he works for NASA, so a friend of mine. So, but I also remember that they did another space station event a couple years later.
Well, no, that was when the trackable went up, wasn't it?
Right.
Have you heard, Chris? Have you heard anything about this? Obviously, this is before your time. But have you heard any stories about this back then?
Well, I mean, I think what comes to mind for me is just because it's ironic that I just got back from Austin, Texas a couple of days ago, and I did the Necropolis cache that is owned by Richard Garriott, who was the one that hid the International Space Station geocache. So I've had a chance to meet him. He's just a super interesting guy, and I think between the space station and the thermal vents cache and the one in Austin, he's made some really amazing contributions to the game.
Oh, wow.
Sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a must do cache.
Yeah, we'll get there. I'll get to Texas. Okay. So I started in July of this year, 2008. I started it basically. I thought it was sounding like a great idea. I actually heard about it in 2002, 2003, but the iPhones couldn't support it at the time, and a GPS was just too expensive. So I did hear about it, but then I read an article saying that the new iPhone 3Gs could now support it. And I'm like, oh, so I had one. So I went and found my first geocache, and that's all it took. I basically wanted to do it for some exercise to get out and relax and stuff like that. This is obviously the pre-geocaching app. So I would have to type the coords into the Apple Maps and then have the 2 dots meet, like go to 1 dot and have me, and there's the cache, and there's me, and meet. I'd print out pages if I was going to the woods, so I didn't have to waste battery life. So I was actually a printouter in the early days. And soon after that, the app Go for Light came out. I don't know if anybody remembers Go for Light. Great app. It was pre-geocaching app. And I used that app until the real app came out, is what I did. Moving along to 2009, moving right ahead. The geocaching app was released in 2009. Chris, have you heard anything about when it's released during this time?
Yeah, most of the people that were involved with the actual work at that time have since moved on. So Brian probably would be the best source of information about that. But just in general, it was obviously a huge moment for the game because it made geocaching so much more accessible to so many more people. Now, obviously, that has led to endless conversation about the good and the bad of exposing it to more and more people, but it's a fact that it certainly cut down on the barrier to entry because before then, obviously you needed a GPS device and that was just something that not everybody had. But bringing the app online certainly got the game out there to more people, and it got it out to me and probably to a few of you guys too. So I'm certainly very thankful for it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I got my first GPS that year on Father's Day for when I used whenever I went to the forest. But then the app came out, total game changer for me. I mean, it made it so much easier to urban cache. I still only used it for urban caching at that time, during that time. And 2009, geocaching was born in 2009, guys. Just for me personally. Moving on to 2010. 2010, we're going, look at me, cook right through this. This is a long one here. GC hits 1 million hides and over 5 million geocachers in 2010, which is pretty impressive. The first virtual souvenirs are awarded, I think, in 2010. We think Jesse did some research on this, and we think we got it back to 2010 is when it started.
It was actually July 2010 was the first souvenir.
Good job.
I'm a good researcher.
Website was translated into languages other than English for the first time in 2010. How about that? And the Lost and Found events, the infamous Lost and Found events, which was the last time a new icon was introduced in 2010. So
other than lab caches.
Other than lab caches, yes.
Yeah.
And Giga.
And
Giga.
Yeah.
Oh, look at Jessie. See Jessie was talking smack about how well she does.
Thanks.
Chris, what do you, Chris? I've always, I want your opinion on this because you're a lackey and you work there. I've always said that 2010 to 2014, I consider to be the golden age of geocaching. That was when it just exploded and everything was cooking and moving. What do you think about that? How do you think of my?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, again, it's one of those debates that it kind of depends on which measures you use. And I think for a lot of people, they look at number of hides and say, well, over the last few years, the number of hides has tended to drop year over year. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things that you need more distance from it to know when the quote unquote golden age would be. And I'm not sure that's when it was, but certainly by a lot of measures, it was an extremely popular time when the game was first, as we just talked about, the app had just come out. There was kind of an explosion of people that were exposed to the game, and it was first being talked about. It seemed really new to a lot of people, even though it had been around for 10 years.
Right.
So yeah, it was an exciting time. But I'd like to think that that there's still a lot of exciting times.
The golden years are still ahead of you, not behind you, so to speak.
That's right. That's right.
For me personally, the Chicago Geocaching Podcast went on the air in 2010 for the first time. And Chad.
Yeah, so I got my first
spray. Here we go.
Yeah, I got my first geocache in October of 2010, a week after the 10-10-10 event, by the way.
Oh no, you did not.
So it was October 17th when I got
Didn't
it.
get the icon, Chad.
Didn't get the icon. So and at the time I was on a BlackBerry, and while I think there was an app out for it, I wasn't aware of it at all. So I did my first several caches with a Garmin Nuvi. For anyone that doesn't know what a Garmin Nuvi is, that's an automobile GPS unit.
I had a friend that did that for like literally 500 caches. Don't feel bad.
And then I had a 133-day dry streak.
133 days. You found, so how many caches did you find?
I think I found 11 that first week of caching, and then it was dry for 133 days, and we'll get to that next year.
All right. Moving on then to 2011. This is when everybody joins the fray. Geocaching. Oh, Chris. Geocaching gives us the challenges.
Yes.
Oh, Chris.
Yeah, the infinite.
And I'm just blaming you. You work there, so I got to blame somebody, and I'm blaming you. Oh, Chris, come on, man.
It's interesting. It's that's something that I've enjoyed just asking people about it who were here at the time. And actually, on our podcast, not long ago, we had Nate Irish before unfortunately, he left us to move on to a new opportunity somewhere else after many years at HQ. But he was around back then, and he talked about challenges on our podcast, and it was interesting the way he remembered it, and Brian was part of that conversation too. Was that for those first several years after the website was launched and things were cooking, as you said before. Everything was, the features that they were adding were just kind of no-brainers, and they were generally accepted and people were excited about them. And they didn't have to do a whole lot of testing because, again, they were no-brainers. And I think in retrospect, everyone agrees that with challenges, it was something that not enough testing was done. It was something that was assumed, like all the other features that had come before it, would be a good thing. It was great intentions behind it. And when it launched, there was a lot of confusion. It just didn't work out the way that was envisioned. And in retrospect, was, I think, a great learning experience because, again, up until then, the success of things had, I think, maybe masked some problems with how products were developed and tested and launched. So I think that was, for all the bad about it, was good in a lot of ways too, because I think that it informed the way things were done from that point on. So, but yeah, it isn't something that is looked back on with fondness here.
So for some of our audience who may not have been around when challenges were out, why don't you explain a little bit about it? And by the way, for those who aren't aware, this is not the same as a challenge cache.
No. But let me before he explains what it is that I think personally it seemed like it was doomed from the start, because what happened was there was buzz around it. Something's coming, and something to do with challenges, and so everybody thought it was the challenge icon.
Right.
That's what I did. That's what I thought.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what everybody thought. So suddenly we get this is bleh, and we were like, oh, that what? Like, that's not the challenge icon, So, Chris, can you explain to our audience what that debacle was back in 2011?
Well, challenges were, and that's the problem. It is kind of hard to explain. It was
good because I can't. So
yeah, I mean, it was something where you would develop a challenge that other people could accept and try to complete, and you would get credit for completing it, and you could rate the challenge. You could vote it up or down, and the idea was that over time the upvoting would surface challenges that were interesting to people, and the ones that were downvoted or not rated as highly would not be as visible to people. And again, it just didn't work out the way anybody was hoping it would.
So a couple examples would be like take a selfie in front of Google headquarters and post it online, or HQ and post it on the challenge. Or Snuggin's he made a bunch of them. God bless his soul, but it was always about touching Uranus. So the planet. So you had to go find planetary objects like
touch Uranus.
And touch Uranus. So
And
those are the types of things that wind up crawling out of the woodworks when you have something like this.
Yeah, and they weren't reviewed.
No.
It was one of those things that they were kind of trying to learn a lesson from the downfall of virtuals, which part of the downfall was that they were so difficult to review because of the subjectivity of them, and so challenges weren't reviewed, and that took some burden off of the reviewers. But at the same time, there was the things that ended up out there that you wish maybe would have been reviewed beforehand. Right. So yeah, it was a failed experiment for sure.
And Chris,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jess. What are you saying?
Cody Dog wants to know, why were those records completely removed from people's profiles?
Honestly, that part I do not know. I can go back and ask some folks who were here then and find out what the thinking was behind that, because that was before my time, and that's something that I actually do not know about, to be honest. But I remember having a few on mine, and I remember for a little while you could dig and find the information, even if it wasn't plainly visible. But after a while, it just went away completely, and I guess I wasn't invested enough in it myself as a player to go try to find out why that happened.
It didn't count toward your numbers, if I remember correctly. I don't think it counted toward your.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't count towards your find count. But if I remember right, there was a separate number for the number of challenges that you had completed.
Yeah, I think it was
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Moving along. I got to move along. 2011. Also, the ET Highway gets archived in 2011. Chad, do you remember this?
Yes, sir. I do remember that. That was like August timeframe,
yes,
I believe.
Sure, yes. Around 2011, for me personally, I was really hitting my stride, getting over 2,000 caches a year while doing the Chicago Geocaching Podcast. A little while later, the iPhones and cases were getting better, and I pretty much went exclusively to the iPhone around in 2011. I was 95% using an iPhone. Chad, this is for you now. So,
March of 2011, after a 133-day cashless streak, I'm over in Xi'an, China, which is kind of like in the middle of China in a very industrial city. And I decided, hey, it would be cool to get a cache in a different country. Let's see if there's anything out there. I go to the website. There's one cache within a 100-mile radius of Xi'an, China. And so I digging a little bit further, it's like, oh, that's where the Terracotta Warriors exhibit is. So at the time, now I had an Android phone. I didn't even bother to look for an app, even though I probably should have looked for an app. But I did have offline maps and no data. And I was able to print out a sat image of the location from the hotel I was at. Went to the Terracotta Warriors exhibit. Great exhibit. If you ever get to Xi'an, China, you got to go there. But I got my first out-of-country cache in China. And then I was hooked after that.
Oh, nice. There you go. Jesse Brown, what about you?
So that spring of 2011, my mom had actually gone out from Chicago here to Portland to visit her sister. And she came home with a GPS that she had borrowed from their brother and told me all about caching. So my aunt, who's from Pacific Northwest, was a geocacher at the time. And so she showed my mom. My mom came home all excited and showed me. And I thought, oh, this sounds like fun. So I created my account May 1st of 2011, and I found a free app online, which at the time was CGO. At the time I was using an Android. So I tried that day and did not find a cache. And I tried a few days later and did not find a cache, and tried a few days later. I had no idea what I was looking for, but it sounded like so much fun, you know?
Were they lamp skirts? Were you looking for lamp skirts?
I wasn't, but ironically,
you got to learn how to lift. You don't.
I finally found my first cache a month later on June 1st, and it was a bison tube under a light pole. It was not a lift lamp skirt, but it was under, you know, the ones that have the four. Yeah. The four. It was under one of those in a residential neighborhood, and I can still, to this day, however many years later, remember the feeling of sitting there on the curb next to this lamppost, holding this bison tube, going, "Oh my gosh, I found one! This is so cool!"
You spent the rest of your life chasing the dragon, man. That's what you did,
right? Right. So that year in 2011, I found a grand total of 19 caches in 4 different states. At the time, it was just sort of something that I did, you know, when I was out of town on vacation or whatever, in West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, here in Illinois. But then over that winter, that was my longest slump of my caching career, 194 days without finding a cache.
Oh, nice. 194 days. What about you, Rock?
I've had my slump is shorter.
What about you, Rock Jock? You started in 2011.
Yeah, I did. I started that summer, and for me, I started when my wife and I were going to be driving out to see my sister's family in Colorado. We lived in Kansas, and I was just looking on the state park website to look up camping information. We were going to try to camp along the way as we headed out there, and I saw something about geocaching on the state park's website. They were having what you would call now something like a geotrail. And they had put geocaches at, I think, almost every state park in Kansas. And I had heard about caching, you know, I maybe had read an article about it or something. And so I went ahead and downloaded the app and thought, you know, that'll be fun while we're camping to maybe try to find one of these things. And I remember, I think it was the second one so I found one near our house. And then the second one I went for was at one of these state parks. And every one of the state park caches was a multi. And I didn't know that you probably shouldn't start off with a multi necessarily. And I remember the first one we went for, the first stage, we're following the phone, and you know we're about 200 feet away as we're about to enter this really thick, this dense tree kind of foresty area. And I'm like, well, it says 200 feet. And we walked all the way around it trying to find some sort of an entrance, and there wasn't one. So we just dove into these trees, and it was one of those things where you were like ducking under these trees and around them and stuff. And it was a hot Kansas July day. It was, you know, 90-something degrees. It wasn't comfortable, and I wasn't having very much fun. And found the container at the you know, the first stage, and got the coordinates for the next stage. But as we got out of the trees, we looked at our arms, and my wife and I were both just covered with ticks. And I was like, all right, this game is stupid. I want no part of this. I'm not finding the second part of this thing. We just got in the car, and we got in the car and left. I was like, I went back home, got cleaned up, and a couple days later, it was just kind of gnawing at me. And I was like, there's that. I have the coordinates for this final. And so we ended up going back out and finding it. And over the course of the next few months, we ended up finding every one of the state park geocaches. And they were all, like I said, they were all multis, and they took me all over the state to places I'd never been before. And I was hooked after that. I mean, it was as difficult as that first experience was. After that, you know, that was it for me.
Nice. Wow. That's impressive to go for a multi on your first shot.
Well, like I said, it wasn't out of any, it wasn't impressive so much as stupid in my case, but it all worked out.
Moving along to 2012, ladies and gentlemen, ticking right along. Geo tours are introduced. I can't believe Geo tours have been around that long already. It amazes me. Yep. But Geo tours were introduced in 2012. I was just chugging along. I got nothing in my notes here. Chad, you got stuff in your notes. So
yeah. So I went to my first mega, the Texas Challenge. My second mega, the Going Ape event. Groundspeak headquarters, the block party, the original Stash Black, Doctor Who, a 10 icon run day. So, this was when I was really getting into full force into geocaching. At that point, I was pretty much 100% paperless.
Yeah. Nice.
With the exception of earth caches. Okay. So if I go somewhere where I'm doing 100 earth caches, or well, not 100 earth caches, 20, 30 earth caches, I got to print out a ream.
Okay. Anything else, or am I moving on to Jesse?
I think we can move on to Jesse.
Jesse, you're up. 2012.
So 2012, I found a grand total of 90 whole caches, including my first virtual, which was Cloudgate, aka The Bean, here in Chicago. But at that point, geocaching was just something that I did. I was a broke single mom with a 5-year-old son at the time. And so, he and I would just go off on adventures in the parks in search of treasure. And we had a really, really nice summer that summer. So, but ironically, of those 90, 65 of them I found in December of 2012. I'll give you one guess who I met that month.
Me.
That would be Scott.
Yes.
So I met Scott in December of 2012, and his Christmas gift to me that year was a premium membership so that I could go out and find all of the geocaches.
Yes.
And also that month with him, I found my first puzzle, my first multi, and my first earth cache.
That month?
That month in December.
Really? That month we found all that? Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Rock Chuck, any highlights in 2012, sir?
I think for me probably was I streaked that whole year.
Did you? Really? Wow.
Yeah, I had. In fact, I was just looking at my stats to try to figure out when that started, and it started in over Christmas time in 2011 was when my streak started, and then I kept it going throughout 2012 and finished on January 6th of 13. So, so that was. Like I said, I got pretty hardcore into it pretty quick after starting, and so it was once a day that whole 2012.
Did your wife do it with you by then, or were you just going solo by then?
She's always really enjoyed geocaching. She isn't as hardcore as I am, but she is very supportive of my addiction, and I would say she probably goes with me probably half the time. Would be my guess, but she really does enjoy it a lot.
Does she have her own account?
She does not. She has always said that as much as she enjoys it, she wouldn't be able to handle logging, and she likes me being the one that does all of that work. So, and then I tell her that I'll just charge her $1 a log, and we'll call it good.
Wow. So I'm amazed you didn't burn out. I mean, did you like stop it and then not cache for 2 months, or did you like miss a day and then just kept going? No,
I think it was one of those things where, you start seeing that there's challenges for going for a year, and so that's kind of what was motivating me. And I went, it looks like 11 days longer than a year. And the only reason for that was that, like I said, my streak had started on December 28th, and then when it came around to a year, it was over the holidays, and I was off work anyway, so I kept going for a few more days. But I was ready for it to be over. I've never had any interest in starting another streak. It kind of started to feel like a job, and that shouldn't be what a hobby feels like. So,
right. Oh yeah, I did 151 days, and I was done. Like
yeah, I was 40 some odd days, and I was done. I was like, yeah, no.
Jesse, what'd you do? You did a.
I did. Well, I did a streak of 201 days because my longest slump was 190. What I say it was 194 days or something like that. And I wanted to put out a challenge cache to have your longest streak be longer than your longest slump. So I had to get over that 194. So I went to 201.
Oh, well done. Wow, that's well done though. Good job, sir. That's a tough one. That's streaking for a year is tough. That's well done. Moving along to 2013, we are geocaching related. Hits 2 million hides. Remember that, guys? Remember when they hit 2 million hides? That big hoopla. Geocaching in space. I think that's when they shot that trackable in space, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, and we did the flash mobs.
We did, yes. The first GIF was part of the block party in 2013. And geocaching intro app was introduced, later renamed simply the geocaching app. Oh, remember that? God, that geocaching intro app was not good. That first generation, just not good at all. I mean, I found nothing wrong with it. I was a big fan of the original app. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It was solid. It worked. You know, it was a workhorse. And this next one came out and was just brutal.
Yeah, I was hardcore CGO for the previous 2 years at that point. So it was like I tried it out and was like, well, I actually paid the $9.99 for the original geocaching app.
Yeah,
and still stuck with CGO. And then when the intro app came out, I was like, yeah, let's see what this is like. It's like, oh my God, is this supposed to bring cachers in, or is this supposed to keep cachers away? I get the concept. It was dumbed down to make it easier for people who I don't want to call them the lazy cacher, but limit what's on the screen, limit how many caches are being shown,
right,
that type of thing. But for someone who's been caching a while, it was like total turnoff.
Chris, do you know anybody who currently still works there who worked on this intro app?
No, most of our developers have, there's been some turnover since then. I not to say anything bad about what happened.
You can't. I know we can't.
But I was like you guys. I mean, I was used to the regular geocaching app, and I remember downloading the intro, and as an experienced player, it didn't really do it for me.
Right.
But in retrospect, it laid some of the technical foundation for what is the current geocaching app. So, which I like. So I guess I'm thankful for that. But certainly at that time, the classic app better served experienced players.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I agree. For me personally, 2013, I was with Jesse, and we were caching a ton, taking vacations, caching on vacations. Again, using only an iPhone. And 2013 was the year I started on this podcast, the Geocaching Podcast. I started in 2013. Lord. Chad, what about you, sir?
So for me at this point, megas were becoming a pretty big thing, doing annual megas. So I was doing the Texas Challenge every year at this point. Went to Geo Woodstock for the first time. Hit an 11 icon run this year in 2013. Smartphone GPSRs were also improving, so we started getting smartphones with not only the GPS but the GLONASS satellites reception in there, so making the satellite receptions that much better. And I upgraded my handheld GPS. I went to a Garmin Oregon 600. So when it was released, it was the first handheld GPSR with a decent touch screen. Which was the biggest feature of it in my opinion, plus pretty much unlimited number of caches that you can load. So I've had well over 100,000 caches loaded up on that thing. Before that, you were really limited on how many caches you could load up in a GPSR.
Yes, I remember. Jesse Brown, 2013.
2013.
You had a hell of a year this year. I remember that.
2013 was absolutely
insane.
insane for me as far as geocaching. This was my biggest year, 3,122 finds. And for me, there were so many firsts in 2013. I got my first FTF. I went to my first event, which was in February. So it was only a few months after I met Scott. And before that, I had no idea that cachers actually knew each other. Like I was just totally blown away. That was when I realized what a community it was, and
right.
I think that really sucked me in even more.
That's all you're gonna say about that event?
Yeah, that's all we're saying about that event.
That's all we're saying about that event.
That's it. More firsts for me that year. I found my first.
More about it after. I'll give the sword to the patrons.
No.
Yeah, you are.
I found my first gadget cache in 2013. I went to West Bend, which is the self-proclaimed Midwest capital geocaching capital of the Midwest. There we go. I couldn't get the words in the right order. My head was spinning when we went there. Just so many caches. That April, I found my 1,000th cache, which was Beverly GC28. I found my first challenge cache, and that like opened up this whole new world for me.
Yes.
I had my first 100 plus day. I placed my first hides. I found the original stash tribute plaque. I completed my first geo art. I found my first Where I Go. That was when I started my 201 day streak. I found my first webcam and my first geocaching day that December, cap off the year.
Yeah.
So that was a huge year for me.
That was. Chris, 2013, ring any bells for you?
Well, you guys have done such great research on yourselves. I definitely, I'm realizing I should have done a better job. I think probably the biggest thing for me that year would have been I finished my PhysiGrid for the first time, and that has been the gift that keeps on giving, because I love trying to keep increasing my PhysiGrid numbers. So that's kind of always been something that I've had a lot of fun with, and it always kind of drives what I go out and search for. So, but I still remember finishing it for the first time and how exciting that was, and yeah, so that was probably that. And then I had also purchased a Garmin device for the first time early that year. We had gone caching in California, I remember, and we were just kind of. We didn't really have a plan. We just had the app. We were looking for stuff, and we ended up on the Pacific Crest Trail. And I remember we were going along and having fun and just kind of finding caches. And then all of a sudden, we were out of cell phone range, or coverage, and we were done caching. So I thought, well, gosh, I don't like the way this feels. So we went ahead and got ourselves a GPSer. So, so that was a big moment for me too.
Moving along to 2014, GC related. We got our first Giga event in 2014 in Europe. Lab caches were introduced as beta, the I Heart Geocaching. I remember those.
Oh yeah.
And
that's the only cache that my wife ever did.
Was
on her own.
Oh,
so I created one for her.
I think I created one for you, Jess, didn't I?
Yes, and I created one for you.
Yes. I can't tell you what it was for the life of me. No, but I know I did. And geocache becomes an official word in Scrabble.
Yay.
In 2000.
I remember that.
Big deal.
Yeah.
And for me, 2014, I hit 10,000 finds in 2014. External batteries for iPhones really went mainstream in 2014, so you can keep your phone on as long as you liked, which was so nice. I didn't have to worry about my battery dying anymore. I had a couple externals in my bag at all times. I still do to this day. And the Chicago Geocaching Podcast goes off the air after 100 episodes in 2014. Chad, what about you?
So, I've been a long time listener of various podcasters out there, but had the opportunity to join the Geocaching Podcast as a host, and I took it.
Oh, in 2014.
So, yeah, that was probably the biggest thing for me in 2014.
Okay. Jesse?
In 2014, I went to my first mega event, which was Geo Woodstock down in St. Charles, Missouri. And we had 13 Icon Day that day.
We did.
Later the year then is when we went down to Alabama for the GPS Maze exhibit.
That was in 14.
That was in 2014.
Wow.
Okay. And that was I hosted I also hosted my first event that year. I'd been to many, but I actually hosted one, and it was a birthday event for Scott.
Yeah, I remember that. That was 2014.
That was 2014.
Oh, all right. Rock Chalk, 2014, sir. Anything?
Oh, well, that was a big year for me. I like Jesse. I attended my first mega that year. I went to the Yuma mega event, and then went to Moga in Ohio in March, and that event essentially led to me getting a job my job at HQ. So
Nice.
which happened later in the year. So that was a huge year.
We are up to you
for
now
me.
working. You are now officially working for.
I started working in September of 14, but like I said, it all kind of started at Moga. So I happened to meet somebody there. One of the lackeys met him at that event, and very long story as to how that happened, but it, in a roundabout way, led to me eventually getting a job. So an exciting year for me, to be sure.
Absolutely. Oh,
Were
yeah.
you already living up there,
Nope.
or so you had to move for that job?
Yeah, my wife and I were both born and raised in Kansas and lived in Kansas City, and so it was pick up and move from there to here. So it was but it was one of those things where we had always wanted to live in this part of the country, or at least try living in this part of the country. And I remember shortly after starting geocaching, finding out that there was actually a place where they ran this website and created these products, and it was in the Northwest. And I thought, man, how cool would that be if I could somehow put those two things together? And to be able to have it happen eventually was a really neat thing. So
tell me you got Mingo before you left.
Yes, I did. I was fortunate to have that classic cache right there in my home state. So
Yes.
I definitely had visited Mingo.
That's good.
Awesome.
All right, 2015. Rockshaw comes on board, and challenge caches go on temporary moratorium. Also, before we get into that, hold on. Before we get into that, also, Message Center makes it much easier to communicate with other geocachers. Love the Message Center. Man.
Yes,
One of
definitely.
the greatest things you guys have done. Kudos on the Message Center. And the last block party was held. Chris, why are there no more block parties?
Well, so block party was supposed to be a one-time thing. It was supposed to be that party in 2000, was it 2005? I guess 2010, and then it became, we had a lot of fun. Let's do it again.
Mhm.
Then let's do it again. And before you know it, it's 2015, and it was a whole lot of fun. But one thing we've always that has always been a thing here. It's something that's talked about a lot, is that we are very mindful of how the community supports the company through premium memberships, and that we want to be good stewards of that. And Block Party was something that was as much fun as it was serving a fairly limited percentage of the community. And we could look at the numbers and know that the majority of those people were from this part of the country. And it didn't seem right to be devoting so many resources, both financial and time for employees, to something that benefited a small portion of the community. So that's why we decided to have that be the last one. The hope, and we're still talking about this, is that possibly there could be something to celebrate the 20th anniversary,
right,
in 2020. So we are having a lot of discussions about that now, and hopefully we'll be able to, say more about it sooner than later. But so yeah, the hope is that maybe we can do something more infrequently that can still be a big party, but doing it every year, something that was supposed to be a one-time thing, it got to be a little bit unwieldy over time. So those were kind of the reasons behind it.
And challenge cache is going on temporary moratorium. Tell me about that. Tell me what was going on in HQ at that time.
Sure. So when I came on board, that was really at the height of the issues with challenge caches. And I remember actually during my job interview, challenge caches coming up, and partly because I talked about how much I loved them. And
sure, I loved them. I was pissed.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's actually something that was in my favor during that interview process was they thought, well, we've got somebody that thinks these are great and knows a lot about them, and maybe he can help us with this thing. Because once I got in and saw, we have an appeals meeting every morning where my team looks at the emails that come in from both players and from the volunteer reviewers, and we have discussions about the appeals and all that stuff. And what we found was that over half of what we were getting was about challenge caches. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot. I mean, that was something for an aspect of the game that is as much as I love it, as much as you guys love it, it's when we look at the numbers, we can tell it's still a relatively small percentage of the community that is really into challenge caches. And when we were spending over half of our time in those meetings every day talking about them, and the reviewers were really having a tough time with them. There was so much subjectivity involved that it kind of had echoes of virtuals from back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so we realized that we had to have a chance to take a look at them and try to figure out if there was anything that we could do to make them sustainable going forward. And we also realized that was going to be really hard to do if we kept getting hit with all of these appeals every day. And it wasn't giving us a chance to just take a breath and not only think about it, but also get feedback from the community, and which we did through a few different ways, and really take some time to figure out how could this work better going forward. And so that's why the moratorium happened. And then eventually, after about a year or so, we were able to come out with a new set of guidelines that I think has helped quite a bit. And but it was something where, like I said, before I worked here, I had no idea there were any issues with them really. I mean, I just played, and I enjoyed going out and finding them. And then I remember kind of being a little bit, just like, even when I got here and they were talking about some of the problems, I thought, oh, what's the big deal? Just deal with it. But then I really saw it, and I thought, okay, now I understand what this is about, and how this can be difficult for the volunteer community, but also for a lot of players too. So the goal was to come up with something that would be good for everybody, and or at least mostly good for everybody. I know not everybody is 100% happy with everything about the new guidelines, but the goal was to avoid the alternative, which was, worst case, not having them anymore, which I don't think anybody wanted. So, yeah.
No, because I remember it got to the point in during that time, even in 2011 and 2012, it got to the point where here in Chicago, we have a couple different reviewers who go at different times, and it really depended on the reviewer whether it went through or not. One reviewer was really strict, and one was like really like just go ahead, So it really depended, So yeah, well, I feel something had to be done about them, but then on the other side of the coin, I like difficult ones. I liked really, really. Nobody could do this kind of ones. And Jesse and I have done one, which is just absurd. It's absurdly hard to do, So while I think those had a place in this game, I can understand why you guys did it, Chad, 2015.
2015. So I went to Brazil and got the last remaining active 8 cache, or so I thought, and icon. So, well, at the time, it was the last remaining one. It was a great trip. I loved it. Awesome experience. I would still suggest anyone who wants to get an ape cache icon, take a trip down to Brazil. You'll love it. And then I moved from Texas to California.
I remember when you did that. God, that was like 4 years ago or 3 years ago already?
Yeah, almost 4 years ago.
Wow. Jessica Brown.
2015, I finally finished my Fizzy grid with a 5-4. That was the last one that I needed at the time. And ironically, today, that is the only one that is keeping me now from a double Fizzy. So we need some more 5-4s here in Chicago, people. Come on now. Help me out.
That's funny. Rock Chalk, anything 2015 memorable to you? Like I got nothing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for me was you know, it's my first full year here at HQ, and just kind of really digging into the Pacific Northwest. You know, just kind of doing a lot of caching around here, and we, you know, I think we finished all the counties in Washington that year, and just did a lot of driving and a lot of checking out our new states.
That's a huge change. Kansas to Seattle, or bro?
It's a pretty
change.
It's a pretty big change. Yep.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, you go from Kansas, which isn't ugly, but it's flat.
Flat.
Yeah, I mean, nothing there, to Portland and Seattle and just
I mean, it's a beautiful part of the country, you know, to be able to. And again, I am always going to be a Kansas guy. I love Kansas. It's
Rock Chalk is your name.
Rock Chalk's my name. It's Running Jayhawks was my original username actually, and my wife and I are both Kansas graduates, so love Kansas. But you know, there's something about being able to get to the ocean and get to the mountains, and Canada's a couple hours away, and Portland's 3 hours away, and it's just really a spectacular part of the country. I earlier this month, I was biking home from work. I'm able to bike to work most days, and I was biking home, and I saw the Cascades on one side and the Olympics on the other, and I never get tired of that. I never get tired of seeing Mount Rainier. Whenever it's out, I just stare at it. I absolutely love it. I'll never get tired of it. And so yeah, for me being out here, being an outdoors guy, I just don't know if there's many better places, you know, than the Pacific Northwest. So
sure. 2016, moving along. Challenge caches are back with a much clearer guidelines and requirements. The long lost Project Ape Cache in Washington is found in 2016. And that's when you guys gave the whole, what should we do with it? Really, what should we do with it? Come on, Chris. Let's put it back. Put the goddamn thing back, for Christ's sake.
Hey, man, let me tell you something. One thing we have learned is never assume anything.
Come on.
And we thought it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Internally, we thought it was a no-brainer, but I thought, you know what? Let's just make sure. Let's make sure everybody's on board with this idea. Turns out everybody was on board. So
everybody but Chad was on board with the idea.
Everybody but the few hundred people that had went to Brazil and got the last remaining ape cache.
I was like you, Chad. I went down there too, and like you, I would recommend anybody go down there. I thought it was an awesome trip. Wish I could have spent more time there. But I wasn't, at all, it didn't lessen my experience at all that this one was found. And if I had to choose between one or the other, I would choose the Brazil one. I think it's just personal preference. I think it's a beautiful area and a really neat experience to go there. So, but I was excited that what a story. For that old one to be found. And I remember the group that went out and found it. And I remember them bringing it back and bringing it into the visitor center there at HQ and seeing Mountain Bike, who was technically the owner of that. Him and Jeremy were the ones that had gone and put that cache out, and John had maintained it all those years, and getting to see John see it back for the first time. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, they were asking where did he think the cache, where they found the cache was, and I was like, someone pitched it over the edge. I at that point I had been through the Snoqualmie tunnel twice, and been to the revisited cache that was there twice, and we'll catch up another one in 2017. So sorry.
Okay. So, and that being said, Chris, I'm just giving you crap. We actually love that you guys actually ask our input these days. I
totally get that. I just remember when that whole thing happened, and we obviously we talked about it and thought, it seems like this is a win for everybody to put this back out, but let's ask and just make sure. And it gave people a chance to make their feelings known, and it wasn't unanimous, but it was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah,
that
put a big
Right.
chain on, put a big chain on it and get that thing back out there.
Oh, there's a big chain on it. Big chain on a lot of concrete.
One last thing happened in 2016. The Inside HQ podcast begins in 2016.
Wow, that's I'm surprised it's been that long. And obviously we don't you guys that do your stuff every week, that's such an undertaking. We don't do it every week. We try to do about one a month. So we don't I don't claim to have nearly the kind of stamina that you guys have for doing what you're doing week after week, but hopefully it's been something that people have gotten something out of.
No, it's gotten to become a great show.
I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy it as well. It's in my queue. Now, did you recommend that show, or did they come to you?
No, that was something that I recommended. I've always felt like the more opportunities we have we love coming on a show like yours and some of the other geocaching podcasts that are out there, just wonderful shows. And we didn't want to do anything that would take away from any of that. We thought that there was a place for us to be able to, talk about things that we don't get invited on shows to talk about, or just an opportunity to humanize some of the people that work at the company. We've had a chance just to, I've had a chance to, just to do interviews with people who have worked there a long time and just hear their stories about the old days. And so it's not always necessarily timely subject matter. It's more just, hey, let's catch up with Sean Boots, who's worked here for over 10 years, or Nate Irish, who's been here since almost the beginning. I still need to get Jeremy. I haven't had a chance to get Jeremy on yet. But so it's, we try to mix in timely stuff, but then also just telling stories and hearing about the people that work there. That seems to be stuff that the community enjoys. So, hopefully we'll be able to keep doing it for a while.
Good. I got nothing in my notes. Chad, you got nothing in quiet 2016. We both had. Jesse Brown.
The only thing that happened for me, caching wise, really in 2016 was that was the year that I finally made that switch from Android to iOS.
Yes.
And I had actually considered it for quite a while, but I never did. And the reason that I hung on for dear life to my Android was because of CGO. I just could not let that app go. And finally, I just, ripped that Band-Aid off and jumped right in, got my Apple, I don't know what the first one was, I got a 7 probably, and downloaded Cachly that first week, and no big deal. Off I went and kept right on caching. So
she got the geocaching app as well. Don't worry.
Of course.
Don't worry, Chris.
I use it for the message center.
Yeah, the message.
I do use it.
Message center, yeah.
Chris, anything in 2016 that?
There was a lot of fun stuff. I think one of the big highlights for me was I got to go to GeoCoin Fest over in Germany, in Berchtesgaden, which is in the Bavarian Alps, and Brian was there as well, and Annie Love from HQ was there. We just had a really wonderful time. It was my first chance to spend a lot of time with some of the German community and just wonderful people over there. So there was a lot of fun stuff that year, but that was probably one of the personal highlights for me.
Nice. Also, one last thing in 2016, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series after 108 years. One last thing. Moving on, 2017. For Groundspeak brings back virtual caches to certain players, i.e. not me. Geocaching hits 3 million hides in 2017. The remaining travel caches were archived by HQ. I like the traveling caches. I like those. Those were fun. Geocaching Classic app was officially retired in 2017. and the Friend League was introduced. Oh, Chad, the Friend League.
The Friend League. Oh, yeah.
The Friend League. Chris.
Yes.
Who brainchild the Friend
That's
League?
a lot.
Who
That's a lot.
brainchild the Friend League? I'm curious.
The Friend League was actually something that kind of started out as a small project that one of the engineers at HQ was kind of working on, and it really became something that was I think fair to say more than expected. Honestly, I mean that it just kind of started as something that one person was working on, and then realized that, hey, this has some potential to, be exciting for the community, and we've been able to do a lot with it with various promotions over the last year and a half or so. So
you see it in the foreseeable future continuing?
Yeah, I do. I think we're going to be doing more with it this year, and we'll see. It's one of those things that's on the drawing board for this year. So we'll see what happens with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I hit 15,000 fines in 2017. Chad, did you do anything fun?
So, well, GC reinstated that ape cache up in Seattle.
Yeah.
Or actually, I think it's technically Snoqualmie is where it's at. But so I had to go up for my third Going Ape event, mega event, and double the number of ape icons that I had. To two. Yep. And also did a 13 icon run day that day. So I would have had 14 if the state of Washington didn't require you to contact the park services in order to do a CETO. So we tried, I think, 4 attempts before of getting a CETO before the reviewer basically told us, look, stop asking. You need to get the park's permission for any park. And it's like,
Jesse.
Anyways.
Jesse, how about you?
2017 was actually my smallest year since 2012.
Yes.
Since I met Scott, I had only 878 fines that year, which I know for a lot of people that's a lot, but for me that was nothing. I did like virtually no caching that year. I went back to school full time and was working full time and just could not get out and cache. So
did not see much of Jesse that year.
Nope.
Not too much. Rock Chalk 2017. Anything highlighting?
2017 would have been the year that I finished my 50 states.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I remember doing a road trip along the East Coast and flew into Baltimore and went into Delaware and then just kind of started going north and just had a ball. It was in the fall. It was a beautiful time to be there. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and I got to go to New Jersey and go along the along the boardwalk at Asbury Park. I remember that. It was just a really awesome trip. And then my last state was Vermont, I believe. Vermont or Maine? No, it was Maine. Vermont was second to last. But yeah, so that was a very memorable way to end the year.
Nice. That's awesome. Powering through to 2018. GC introduces AR caches for a limited time. Chris? What's up with the AR caches?
Yeah, well, it's
Scoop us.
Well, I don't know if there's much to scoop really. It's I think we've been pretty transparent about that, so that's why I don't think there's much of a scoop. Just that it's an experiment that we've been trying out to see what it could do for geocaching and how the community would react and what kind of caches the community would put out there, and if it's something that they would enjoy. And from what I understand from talking to my colleague who's kind of the project manager on that, it's something where now they're looking at all of the survey data and looking at the number of favor points and just the various data points that we have on AR caches and kind of trying to decide what the next steps would be with that. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys thought about any that you might have done.
Oh, I thought they were great. I talked to Brian about it last week, and I hope they continue it because I think that's one of the ways of to keep the future going is towards that, you know. And it seems like I saw that they pushed it back to March, correct? I think. I don't know if you.
That's right. That's
are they
right.
gonna push it again, or is it gonna end in March? Do you have any idea?
At this point, I have no reason. I mean, I believe it's going to go through March. I haven't heard about it being extended past there, but I guess we still have a few more weeks to see what might happen. But at this point, I haven't heard of any extensions happening. So I would expect that March would probably be when this first phase would come to an end.
Okay. 2018, Jesse. By the way, Jesse, the chat was making fun of you.
I know. I see that. They're only 800.
Only 800 fines.
I know.
You poor baby.
Well, in 2018, I finally hit 10,000 fines.
Chad, are you on? I can't see you. Are you there?
Yeah, I had to step out for a second.
Oh my Chad, 2018. What's your 20?
We finally got a Giga in the U.S., so I had to go, and I believe a couple other people were there as well.
Yeah, a few other people were there. Chris, were you there?
I was there. Yes, I was.
Do you believe Jesse and I actually flash mobbed to the Giga event? I drove 8 hours, and we were there for an hour and a half.
Oh my God!
8 hours back. I was coaching. It's Memorial Day weekend. I have 3 kids in Little League. Do you know how many games I had that weekend?
It's a huge tournament weekend.
That I had to coach. Dude, it was a 16-hour day in the car. Like, literally, flash mobbed it.
So, did you see anybody else besides Daryl?
Yeah, I got a picture with Sonny and Sandy.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's right.
Absolutely. To prove I was there, I had to prove to somebody like I was there. I was there, I signed in, and boom, we were gone. Boom. So, Chris, you, 2018.
Oh gosh.
Last year, for the record.
Yeah, I know. It seems so long ago already. 2018. What comes to mind for 2018? One of my favorite caches in 2018. My wife and I went to New York City, and I'd been there many times before. But before I started geocaching, this is my first time back since I started caching, and I did the Central Park, the bridges and arches of Central Park, which you guys have probably, I imagine, maybe heard of that multi-cache.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just amazing. Just had a ball doing that. I did it over the course of about a day and a half, and just had a great time with that. And I don't know, the rest of it just kind of all blurs together. I mean, we had a lot of fun adventures and went to a few megas. Of course, the Giga was awesome, and did a lot of caching just around that event.
Sure.
Yeah, but fun year.
Yeah, and that brings us to today, 2019. Today, for me, obviously, GC. Well, let's get that me first. Today, caching is still pretty big in my life. Jesse and I do it on vacations all the time. We like to cache in our limited free time. But it is getting more difficult, actually. Our kids are getting older, and they're getting into sports and more time commitments. And it's shockingly, our kids are getting older, and it's getting harder. You think it would get easier to catch? It's getting harder to catch.
No.
So we're trying our hardest. We try and get out whenever we can, but with kids and sports, it's so difficult. But so that's me today, pretty much. I think I'm a little over 17,000 fines these days. Chad, what about you? Anything today?
Today, so I probably don't cache as frequently, but when I cache a lot more thoroughly, or I tend to go out with groups and hit a lot of caches when I go.
Okay, Jesse Brown.
Yeah, I mean, it is getting more difficult, and I think that for me, I feel like I want to make it more of a goal for me to actually hide more, create more quality hides in our area. And, I mean, like you said, it's hard to get out much anymore, especially if we're moving this week and everything else we have going on. So Yeah.
It's when I say it's hard, we get, I mean, we still get like 1,500 caches. So I shouldn't say it's that difficult for us to cache. But my point being is like, I'm not doing the caching I want to do.
Right.
If we go out at night and we go and hit parking grabs at night. I want to go into the woods. I want to go hike in the woods,
Yes.
and I can't. I think we hiked maybe 4 times last year total.
Right.
It's just the lack of time,
Yeah.
That's the problem is that it's so difficult. Chris, before we get into GC, any highlights from this year as of today?
As of today, I've been to Texas twice this year already. I went to the Houston area in January for a long weekend. When you live in Seattle and we have these rainy winters, you just try to get out a couple times during the winter. So
sure.
So I went to Houston for a few days last month, and then my wife and I just got back from a vacation to San Antonio and Austin, and had a great time down there. And I mentioned earlier that one of the caches we did was the Britannia Manor, awesome cache. And so yeah, it feels like we've had a chance to do a lot of stuff already, and it's only not even the end of February. So I'm looking forward to another fun year.
Great. In terms of groundspeak, geocaching, the new .com maps on the website, fantastic. Well done.
Oh, you like them? Good.
I do like them. Yes.
Well, that's something that, again, is really the team that's working on that is really taking feedback very seriously and has been pivoting and making adjustments based on the feedback that they're getting from the community. So hopefully people will keep trying it and keep giving their feedback. I'm one of those. I've told the guys on the team I'm a bad customer because I'm one of those people that I hold off as long as possible before trying something new. And
I dive right in. I'm a diver. I dive right in.
Do you really? I wish I was, and I'm terrible because I should be testing and I should be giving my own feedback. So finally, a couple weeks ago, I said, all right, I need to opt in and really start looking at this, and I'm coming around. But again, I've told them I hold on to that stuff until they pull it away from me.
Drag it out of your hands.
Yeah. But I'm glad to see that you like it, and hopefully people will keep trying the new map and giving feedback, because that's the way it's going to improve and get to where it's something that everybody likes.
Yeah, I mean, it was stagnant for so long, for years and years and years. It was a stagnant map, and then we were hearing rumblings about the map changing, and then finally Jesse's like, "Oh, look at this! They changed the map." And me and Jesse played around with it for 15 minutes, and it was great. I mean, Jess, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's a welcome change. It reminds me more of like how it used to be with the lists and the.
Right. Yeah, I miss those days when they took away the list, when you could view, when like you would click on the map and you have a list of all the caches that are on the map. That was a great feature that they took away that one time. All right, and then finally, I know we were over the time limit, guys. Thank you for staying with us. Chris, one last question here: the Adventure Labs. You don't think you're not getting away out here without answering some questions about that, sir? Come on.
Well, I would hope that I was hoping Brian may have talked about it last week. He's been extremely involved with that, but yeah, it's an experiment, and we're in the early stages of it. And I think, I know you're going to start seeing hopefully more of these adventure labs popping up in various places as people are selected, and as some of the geocaching organizations who have been offered a lab adventure will also be getting theirs out there. So I think throughout the course of the spring, you're going to be seeing more of them, and then people will be able to actually use that app and start giving us some feedback on it. I think for any of us that have done lab caches at mega events and what have you over the course of these last several years, know that web player is not great, and I think this app is going to make those lab caches a lot more enjoyable and a lot more accessible. But again, it's an experiment, and getting feedback from people over the next several months is going to be really important. And as the creators start finishing their adventures and getting them out there to the community, more and more people will be able to try them and really let us know what they think about that new app and how we can make it better.
Mm-hmm. And I know some came out. You gave a group of lab caches out a week or two ago. I think it was a week ago, and then you gave a group out yesterday.
We're kind of going in. I think they're doing it in waves of around 50 or so, with the idea of there being around 250 to start with. And I think I heard Brian say last week at the beginning of your show, the very little that I got to listen to was just kind of saying that, this is something that we're hoping to keep growing. Mm-hmm. But as with any experiment, we'll kind of see how things go here in the early days and make adjustments and pivot as necessary.
Right. So are more supposed to come out? Do you have any idea what the
like I said, that I think what we have said is that there would be a total of around 250 cachers in this kind of first phase, and we were doing those in like waves of 50 apiece. So mm-hmm. I don't know if we've done all 250 yet, but that was the idea, that the first phase of it would be around 250.
Okay. All right. So that brings us today. Anything else, Chris, you want to bring up today? Because
well, I guess this this week announced the Creation Celebration promotion that will be happening. So that's something that hopefully people will be excited about, and it will, I think, hopefully inspire. I'm looking forward to it inspiring me, in inspiring hopefully some quality cache building, and some of the people out there that are great cache creators getting a chance to share some of their knowledge with people in their communities. Mm-hmm. It kind of harkens back in my mind a little bit to that promotion that was done, I think it was 2013 maybe, the Maker Madness thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back then I remember going to a couple of events in my area where I got to see some of the really good cache builders kind of show off how they did what they did. So there's some similarities to that here, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what kind of events people come up with for that.
Mm-hmm. And anything about the Mardi Gras one you want to talk about?
That one I don't know a whole lot about, to be honest with you.
Is it gonna include the friendly, Chris? Come on.
I honestly don't know enough about it, and I'm afraid that if I talk extemporaneously about it, I'll say something that is totally wrong. So, I probably should just keep my mouth shut from there.
All right, Chris. Thank you so much for being on this show and talking about the evolution of geocaching, sir.
It's my pleasure. It was a lot of fun to talk to you guys.
All right, stay right there. Next week's show, guys, is going to be, because Jesse and I are moving on Sunday, closing on a house tomorrow. Cache or Coffee, February Cache or Coffee next week, guys, because we got to do some quick planning, because I don't know if we're going to even have internet. We're all for internet.
Oh God!
Nothing here. So we're flat out just
we may be broadcasting from Starbucks.
Yeah, maybe from the Starbucks. So, that's next week, guys. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show, buddy. It was great. Thank you for the stories. We much appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
All right, guys, hold on one second here. Please join us again next week as we take your calls live every Wednesday night at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, right here at geocachingpodcast.com. The archived video versions of our podcasts are available on our website or on our YouTube channel, and the audio versions are available on most of your favorite podcatchers. If you like the show, please head on over to Apple iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it, and it really helps the show when you do. If you prefer to watch the show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, and don't forget to ring that little bell to get notified when we go live. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for updates on upcoming shows and general geocaching information. And hey, if you haven't already, please consider becoming a patron of our show. With tiers starting as low as $3, you will get a ton of additional information, extra videos, extra audio, only available to our patron members. That's patreon.com today and subscribe. patreon.com/the Geocaching Podcast. Thanks once again to our sponsors, Cashly, Logwork, and FTF Geocacher Magazine. And that's all we got this week. So I'll see you guys next week, talking geocaching, taking your phone calls. In the meantime, be good, be safe, hug your loved ones, and we will talk to you guys next week. We are clear. There you go. I'll just get off. All right, guys. Thank you so much in the chat room. We appreciate it. Chris, again, always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you. It was good to talk to you guys.
So hold on, let me stop the broadcast. All right, guys. Cash your coffee next week. Thank you guys so much. Great questions in the chat room, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks a lot.